The Big Show.
Greg, we got the playoffs. We got six games to break down.
Super wild card weekend, Ross. Super wild card weekend.
Super wild card weekend. You know what's weird, Greg? And I'm not trying to be mean to Seahawks and Dolphins fans, but it is kind of interesting that we've expanded the playoffs from 6 teams to 7 teams. And I kind of would have been more intrigued if either the Packers or the Lions made the playoffs in the NFC. And then in the AFC, I kind of probably would have been more intrigued if the Steelers made it. In other words, this is a year, Greg, where if they had 8 in each conference, I wouldn't have complained. Now, it's not going to be like that every year. But it would have been all teams with winning records, on the wild card part of it. And interesting. We start, though, Greg's at Greg Cosell, by the way, but we start with Seattle at San Francisco. And just a wonderful season for the Seahawks. Nobody expected this from them or from Geno Smith. They're kind of playing a freight train, it feels like, Greg. What will you be looking at in this one? How does Seattle, have a chance to stay in this one and maybe pull off the upset?
I think with these games, all of them, Ross, there's probably 10 things you could talk about, and we can't do that. So, I'll focus in on just 1 or 2 things for each game. And one of the things I'd be looking at this game is Geno Smith, as good a year as he had, and this is not all his fault, by the way, but he's the most sacked quarterback in the NFL on third down. And third down is where it's more difficult for offenses to really define reads and throws for quarterbacks. Third down, particularly third and longer yardage situations, is where the defense kind of has a tactical advantage or perhaps a personnel advantage, depending on the team. And in this case, I think the Niners have that advantage. So third down is what I'm really going to be looking at in this game because the Niners pass rush is obviously problematic. The O-line for the Seahawks has not played particularly well down the stretch. The rookie left tackle, Charles Cross, has actually, over the last 6 weeks or so, not played very well in pass protection. He has really struggled in one-on-one pass protection. So that's just one area to look at in this game.
That's interesting. Because usually guys get better, young players get better over the course of the year. But I can tell you, Greg, I wasn't even playing, and I hit the crap out of the rookie wall.
Right.
It just was such a long year, and I was used to Ivy League 10 games. 10 games was week 6.
Yeah.
Because of the 4 preseason games. And pro football is an all-day thing. It's your job. College, you're used to getting up at 8:30 or whatever. Marty Schottenheimer had the rookies lift in Washington, Greg, at 6 a.m. So, my body clock was so off. I went from, I think, 316 or 308 to 288 by the end of the year.
You were a little worn out.
That's interesting about Charles Cross.
Yeah, he's not played particularly well, and it's been a little bit of a problem. And as I said, Smith is the most sacked quarterback on third down in the league this year.
So I'm not saying he's doing this, Greg, but when I see that, I think he might have finished with over 70% completion percentage. When I see that, and then I hear your stat, there's a part of me that always wonders, is he not throwing the ball away for statistical purposes? And I'm not putting that on Geno.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking you to say that, Greg. But there are some quarterbacks that have been known to do things for their stats and their passer rating. I don't think that's Geno, but he also shouldn't be taking that many sacks on third down.
I couldn't speak to that at all. All I can say is I think they've done a really good job with him this year with the use of play-action boot, with the use of pass game designs. Those you can do much better, obviously, Ross, in proactive situations, normal down and distance situations. It's more difficult to do that on third and long. Now, he's made some phenomenal throws this year. The touchdown he threw to Lockett last week against the Rams was just about as big-time a throw as you could make. So he's made big-time throws. But third down is just one area I'll be looking at in this game.
That was awesome. That throw to Lockett was awesome, and they needed it
Oh,
desperately.
it was a great throw.
All right. The Chargers are at the Jaguars. And I think the key I wanted to know from you, Greg, is this the best playoff hair matchup of quarterbacks that you've ever seen?
That's very good, Ross. Very good. I spent a lot of time yesterday actually looking at the Chargers offense and their passing game. And it's a really interesting passing game because you watch them and you see a lot of really good concepts in their passing game, both versus man and zone. Now, this is an offense very much built on Herbert getting completions, which seems to be an overlooked thing in today's NFL. Getting completions is not a bad thing. Every pass can't be 30 yards down the field. Herbert, in a good way, can be mechanical and robotic, and he gets the ball out and he completes passes. And since they have let's put it this way, they don't have a big time run game. They don't have a bad run game, but it's I don't know what the numbers are. They're probably near the bottom of the league in terms of rushing. But so the run game is not truly a foundation of what they do. So they need completions. They need a sustaining element to their pass game. And that's what Herbert's really good at. But then as I said, when I watched, 100, 150 dropbacks in a row yesterday, which is tough for me to do during the regular season for one team, you really see some nice concepts, the way they attack zones with route combinations. They're good against man coverage. I think Mike Williams, who I know got hurt, but I think he's supposed to be okay. He's a really important part of what they do because he's their boundary X receiver, and he can win one-on-one, and he can make contested catches.
One of the things that's interesting about the Chargers, Greg, is a lot of people complain that they don't throw it downfield enough because they have Herbert, and that's a big criticism you see online. I actually asked some people at the Chargers about that. They don't really have like a speed guy to take the top off the defense. I mean, Mike Williams is great making contested catches, but he's not a burner. Keenan Allen's not a burner. They don't really have that guy that just blows you away deep,
Was that what they said?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the thing is they can go deep by design, but they don't have the one guy that you just line up, let's say, and say you run by people.
That's what somebody with the Chargers told me when I asked him about it.
But all I know is in watching, as I said yesterday, 150, 200 dropbacks from throughout the season in a row, you see some really nice concepts. But I would just make the point that's often overlooked is there's nothing wrong with getting sustaining completions. That helps your offense as well.
Right. Plus, they've had some O-line issues. They don't want to drop back and throw it deep. I think they want to get the ball out.
And I don't know, Slater, he's in that window now, that open window. Who knows whether he goes this week, but I guess it's possible.
They say he's not going to play this week.
Oh, they say he's not? Okay.
Not going to play this week, but there's some hope maybe for next week.
If they were to win, if he could go the next week. Yeah.
But he's just happy to be out, back out there practicing. Dolphins, Bills, Greg. I'll be doing that game Sunday at 1. So what is your analysis, whether it's whatever? I mean, I don't know. The Bills defense wasn't that great against the Patriots last week. And I don't know, maybe you know something about Skylar Thompson because I don't know much.
No, I don't know. I did not watch him coming out of Kansas State, so I don't really know an awful lot about him. I don't have a large sample of his tape to really say that much about him at this point. This is one of those games where we look at it right now and we just assume, okay, it's Bills 30, Dolphins 10. But these are always the games that I think you have to be a little careful because if you're the Bills, and first of all, the Bills offense has done very well against the Dolphins defense over the last couple of years. I know the Dolphins defense is playing well. They've got some good players. They'll play both man and zone. They like to play man. That's probably more of their MO than zone. They played week 15. They used a spy on Josh Allen at times. There were times Allen beat the spy. So you look at this and you think that they can't win this game if the Bills put up a lot of points. That's the way you think just generally. So to me, and these are not profound thoughts, but for the Bills, it comes down to not making the kinds of mistakes that give the Dolphins an opportunity, whether it's a drop punt, whether it's penalties. If the Bills just play and they don't, and I think this is a game where Josh Allen just has to play and not worry about being special. I think his special plays just come as he plays through a game, but there's nothing wrong on 3rd and 10 if they give you a blitz and it beats your offense, and you know what? You throw it away, or you run for 4 yards and you punt. That's okay. Now, we know Allen can be – the throw he made to Stephon Diggs last week for the touchdown, I'm sure you saw that, Ross. Not many people are making that throw. I mean, he threw that from the opposite hash. That ball probably traveled more than 70 yards in the air, and he had to throw it flat-footed. He couldn't really step into it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, some of the throws that he makes at times. Although, Greg, he's had a lot of silly turnovers this year too. He leads the NFL in interceptions in the red zone. That'll get you beat against the Bengals or the Chiefs.
Yeah, he had one more red zone interception, by the way, than Patrick Mahomes.
Isn't that interesting that those guys, that he has 5 and Mahomes has 4?
Yeah.
That seems like a lot for those guys. But I'm assuming your argument would be, listen, if you're going to be making that many, I mean, they're 1 and 2 in touchdown passes. If you're going to throw that many touchdown passes, you're probably going to have to throw some picks down there too, trying to fit the ball in.
I'm not defending Josh Allen throwing bad picks in the red zone, by the way. He had some really, really bad ones where only he could tell you what he saw. I couldn't. So there's no question. See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That can't happen in this game. You know, that's the kind of situation, Ross, where if you're down in the red zone and it's 3rd down and you just don't see it, that's where he has to either just run or get a few yards, potentially take a sack, throw it away, just get the points. Just keep the game playing. Don't give the Dolphins an opportunity. I mean, but yeah, you can't defend red zone interceptions, although you have to look at each one individually because some are not on the quarterback. But, obviously he also makes special plays. Josh Allen to me is not, he can be, but I don't think he's a precision quarterback in the same way, let's say, that Joe Burrow is, but then Allen can make plays and throws that other guys can't.
Giants, Vikings. It's interesting. I think it's one of the more interesting games this weekend because they just played a few weeks ago and it was an awesome football game. What's kind of the matchup you're looking at or breaking down in Giants, Vikings Sunday at 4:30? It was the only game
this year, Ross, in which Brian Daboll let Daniel Jones drop back and throw. Some may remember the Giants lost to the Lions big earlier in the season, and in that game, Jones had to throw because they were down big. But that was the only game that was a close game all the way in which Brian Daboll let Daniel Jones drop back. I think he had 45 or 46 dropbacks in that game, and he was really, really good in that game. So I'm very curious to see, because we know that the Vikings have struggled to defend the pass this year. If they take that approach, the game will be indoors, weather won't be an issue. It'll be a fast track. I think it's evident watching the tape that Jones has gotten more comfortable with Isaiah Hodgins, with Richie James. Slayton had been there, so he's been around. Hodgins has developed into kind of a nice receiver for them. In a league where when you throw it a lot, if the Giants choose to, receivers get targets. So receivers therefore get receptions, and Hodgins has kind of developed into their guy, and I'm curious to see how this plays out. I'm curious to see if Daboll takes that same approach and throws the ball a lot against this Vikings defense.
I never even heard of Hodgins before this year.
I did him coming out of Oregon State. I did him coming out of Oregon State. He was a put up big numbers in college. He's not fast, which is why he was a late round pick by the Bills. He's 6'4", 215. Is not going to run by anybody, but has really good hands, has a feel for route running. Those kinds of players do play in the NFL. They're not number ones, but you know what? For the Giants, he's probably their number one, and that's really all that matters to them.
Sunday night, I was really excited about Ravens-Bengals. It doesn't sound like Lamar Jackson is going to play,
no.
Greg, which is a major bummer. I don't even know what you got on this game with that.
Well, I think on this game, you have to look at the other side of the ball. In recent weeks, the Ravens have essentially played big nickel as their defense. Now, that could change because I believe Marcus Peters will be back this week. But in the last number of weeks, without Marcus Peters, they've essentially played Kyle Hamilton, the rookie safety from Notre Dame, as their slot corner. He plays almost every snap. They don't play a lot of man coverage. They're a high percentage zone team. And they haven't blitzed very much. They've been very selective with their pressure. So, we're used to thinking of the Ravens when Wink Martindale was there as high percentage man, high percentage blitz. That's not the way they played this year under Mike McDonald. I just finished watching the tape from the game this past week because these teams are having a rematch this week, obviously. And not much blitz, a lot of zone coverage. Hamilton was playing in the slot, so he was lining up over Boyd, but not necessarily matching him man to man. And what they did is Humphrey played boundary corner, which gets him against Chase a good amount because Chase is predominantly their boundary X, but he played boundary corner. And last week, Worley was the field corner. Now, again, much of this is dependent on Marcus Peters. If he plays, we could see some meaningful changes in how the Ravens go about playing defense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to spend the most time, I think, on Cowboys Bucks. I'm very interested in it. Man, Greg, I kind of thought Dak had done a lot of good things this year, and everybody this week is just killing Dak. Just saying it's the worst season he's had. He's playing terrible. Weren't they when he came back from injury, weren't they number one in scoring in the league?
He did not play well last week. I think last week, when it's the last game of his season, people remember that. Obviously, they're moving on to the playoffs. But last week, he did not see things at all. His vision was very limited and condensed. And when you're not seeing things, you tend to move and play fast. He didn't really play with any good sense of timing or anticipation last week. He had a bad game. I think what we both know about Dak, Ross, is that he's not the kind of guy that's necessarily going to come out and have a really bad game 2 weeks in a row. So we'll see there. But on the other side, I spent a lot of time looking at the Bucs passing game this week. It's really interesting. I don't look at their pass game and come away and say, wow, they have great concepts. I almost feel like it's Brady throwing to some really good receivers, and they expect their receivers to win, and Brady's going to throw them the football. And I would say 2 weeks ago when they played Carolina, because this past week, obviously, Brady didn't play many snaps, and they just kind of wanted to get through the game. I would say that was the best the O-line played. And Carolina does not have a bad defense, by the way. So Brady was comfortable in the pocket. He had more time. They were able to push the ball down the field. That has to happen. This team has not been able to run the ball at all this year with any kind of consistency. So it really has to be the passing game. They're a pass-driven offense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the Carolina Panthers allowed Mike Evans to beat him over the top 3 times. I don't know how that happens in that game. I know J.C. Horn was hurt. I don't care. Just don't let the guy run past you. That is unbelievable to me. Yeah, Greg, you're unbelievable every week. Huge fan. You know it. At Greg Cosell on social. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross.